stories surround all of us, and it's such a human way to connect. Amber Heard was trying to paint the victim story, and like that was, I'm
Mhm.
sure, her attorney's plan. It's like, we need to go in there and we need to do everything we can to paint you as a victim. But what
Mhm.
Marvel did brilliantly is they had a massive story plan from the first time they launched Iron Man, and I believe it was
Mhm.
2008,
Yeah.
all the way up till Endgame.
Cool. Let's go. So, welcome everyone, and please let me introduce my guest for today's podcast. His name is Brian, and today I will do something different. Since he's a storytelling, like he has expertise in storytelling, I would like for him to introduce himself. Like, what is his story? So, Brian, like, how
Oh
would you
yeah.
describe your story?
My story. So, hi everybody. So my name is Brian. I am a professional storyteller. My story I don't have down down in the details yet, but in a nutshell, I'm somebody who found storytelling about a year ago, and it's been something that I have found a deep passion for. And it's not just so much the art of it, but it's also just understanding how we as humans have evolved because of storytelling and how our brains
Mhm.
have become wired for it. And then I've found that there's different experiences that storytelling has actually impacted my life in one way or another. So to me, I find that if I can teach people storytelling and help people tell their stories, I feel like that's the direction I want to take my life in.
Very interesting. So, in the start, you talked about how important storytelling is for human, like how we evolved through the storytelling. So, how important role do you think stories played, and why were they essential in the development of, let's say, human society or even the communication?
Great question. So it goes all the way back to the fact that, at one point all we had to communicate with one another were stories. As humans, we sat around a campfire and we shared stories with one another to help each other as a species just get through the chaos of the world that we all lived in. And
Mhm.
so to me, it's like you had a hunter that was sitting there around the campfire, and he was talking with the entire tribe of people about, let's say, a bear encounter he came up against. And he told the story of what he did to handle that situation. Now, anybody hearing that story is going to know, hopefully, what to do whenever they have when they encounter a bear. But what's fascinating is that once that story was shared, if it's in the form of a story, then everybody just remembered it. It's something that they don't have to be told several times. You hear that story once and it just sticks. And so it
Mhm.
was key to our survival as early humans. And then in today's day and age, stories are still as relevant as they were back when we were, sitting around that fire, except now we're entrepreneurs helping other entrepreneurs with their stories, or we're leaders trying to help other leaders with their stories, and even parents trying to help their kids try to understand the life that they live in. Stories surround all of us, and it's such a human way to connect.
Yeah, very interesting. And I've been thinking about it, like everything around us, even not to get too philosophical on this, but
Yeah.
even our identity is a story which we tell ourselves. Like, this is who I am, and this is my story. I'm born
Right.
here. This is my story. I have done this thing. So I was listening to someone, and he said something really interesting, that our story is very biased toward our failure. Like we become our harshest critics. So, is there any way to tell a better story to yourself, like which can help you, like motivate you and help you in doing good things, and not be always like this, doubting yourself? And so, is there any way to do this?
Yeah, so I connected with that thought at one point as far as the story we tell ourselves, and I started thinking about stories that have affected me from my own past. And one
Mhm.
story that came to mind was me sitting there in class in sixth grade, and the teacher walks in and she announces to everybody that there is now a student body position that's open for the school. And she asked the kids in the class who wanted to volunteer to be a student body treasurer. And so, me, along with three other kids in the class, we raised our hands. And so, all of our names got written on this whiteboard. The teacher then asked all the kids to close their eyes. And she asked everybody to take a vote. And she didn't want the kids to see, who was voting for each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, she had everybody close their eyes. When I opened my eyes, the kid on the very top, I think, had like 4 or 5 votes. But then there was only one vote for me, and I was the one who voted for me, so like,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm looking at that whiteboard and I'm just filled with embarrassment. And honestly, that was something that I carried with me for quite a few years. I kind of just kept myself in a shell, like, I don't want to put myself out there, like, that was a pretty horrific moment in my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did when I started learning about storytelling is I've revisited that story in my mind. Of course, we're adults now and we've experienced life, and we're much different people than we were. And I started thinking about that story, like, I felt like a victim in that story, but then I had to really ask myself, what level of accountability do I have for what happened? Here I am in
Mm-hmm.
6th grade, and first off, I'm voting for myself. And I looked at that decision like, if I'm voting for myself and I'm not voting for other people, why would anybody else vote for me? I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
there for anybody else. And just kind of thinking about, who I was as a child during that time, it was like I must have been just this kid who was very it was very clear that what I wanted was for other people to just, like me, but not for me
Mm-hmm.
to necessarily go out there and like them. I've done this with quite a few stories, but if I was to give any advice, I would say that revisit a time in your life that may not have been something that you're proud of or you would look at
Mm-hmm.
as a failure. Revisit that moment in your mind from a completely unbiased perspective and just ask yourself, what's the other side of this story? What's the side that I
Yeah.
don't see? And since I did that, since I revisited that moment in 6th grade, I forgave myself for, the child that I was, and then I was able to get over it. And when you start kind of
Mm-hmm.
revisiting those stories, which can be hard sometimes, you can lift this weight that's just kind of been on your shoulders, and you can move forward in life without having these situations that, whether or not you realize it or not, possibly have been holding you back. That would be my
Yeah.
advice to anybody.
It's very interesting, and I think it gets very therapeutic. Like when you visit your stories and you have courage to forgive yourself, because that requires a lot of courage. Because we can be our harshest critic. Like whenever we go into memory, we will have all the biases toward the negative side of the story, and that's something I think which requires external help. Let's say it can be someone like a coach or a therapist or someone who's out there to pull out the details from the story. Because
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I think I was able to do it because I learned storytelling, so like my mind became wired for what to look for.
Hmm.
I will say that it's also something that you can carry with you on a day to day basis, knowing that we're writing our story every single day when, we wake up and we're interacting with people. It's like you and I have this moment right now, which is going to be part of our stories, right? This
Yeah.
interview, next interviews that you're going to do, you can always ask yourself, who do I want to be in this moment? And if, let's say, this situation starts getting, not to say it's going to get hostile because you're a fantastic guy, but let's say it got hostile,
Hmm.
it's like I can decide, who do I want to be in that story? What character do I want to be? And you get to choose, and then you get to look back and think, I was exactly who I wanted to be. And I think that can kind of help when we let our emotions kind of get the best of us, and we start doing or saying things that we're not necessarily proud of. Anyway, a little bit of a tangent there, but it's
Hmm.
always good
It's
to
very
think
interesting.
about, who am I in my
Yeah.
story right now today, and who do I want to be?
Yeah. It's a very interesting journey for sure. Like I've been on this journey and I've been very conflicted by like sometimes there like you want to seek validation from outside, like from your peers, your parents, your society, and there's also a conflict which want your like inner peace. That's also there. So you're always like fighting between uh, validation from peers and like what I can say. Mostly the things which are outer for showing someone and showing to the world that I have made it. And there's one thing
Right.
like inner peace. So, what stories do we tell ourselves? Like, could there be a balance? Like, I'm at inner peace, but at the same times, I'm not driven by the judgments which societies have for me. So,
I
is
hear you.
storytelling can help in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, the stories that I'm even projecting to, like, the world around me as far as like who I
Hmm.
am. And in whether or not we realize it or not, I mean, we could just be messaging somebody, but we can also be, telling them who we are, through even just like a brief story.
Hmm.
What I would say, and this is what truly helped me out in my storytelling journey, and that was it was how close am I to, um, I guess, who I am on the inside when I'm telling my stories to the outside world. And you brought up something that really plagued me for quite a while, and that was looking for validation from other people. And sometimes
Hmm.
I would just start to tell a story that I wanted it to be entertaining, and I wanted to be looked at as someone who was liked, and I wanted to be looked at as somebody who was accepted. And I think it's a very innate human, quality that all of us have. We look for community and we
Hmm.
look for acceptance. Except as I started telling my own stories, I started looking at them like subjectively with an
Hmm.
unbiased. And I'm thinking, like, this isn't me, like
Yeah.
this is just who I'm trying to show the world that I am. So I've been on this journey as I'm telling stories and thinking about my own story. It's who is Brian, and
Hmm.
when I'm having conversations, am I doing it because I want them to like me? Am I doing this because it's who I am?
Yeah.
And it's a very tough thing to kind of get used to, but I can honestly tell you, Ankit, since I've started really just allowing the world to see that I'm a weird dude, like
Hmm.
I'm not at all, this just well communicated, person that I try to show the world that I am. It's like I'm a pretty weird dude and I have quirks, and I think it's what makes me unique, and I'm trying to just be more comfortable telling my story and just kind of showing the world that, I'm not perfect, but I'm me. And if you don't like me, and that was a big thing too, if you don't like me, like, that's okay. I heard this celebrity once that was on TikTok, and they had said that if
Hmm.
somebody's opinion, whether or not it's positive or negative, their opinion of you is none of your business. And so I
Yeah.
look at that like, that's true. Like, I'm just going to be me. And if you don't like me, that's not really my business. Like, that's on you. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I think when it comes to tying to storytelling, I want to make sure that I tell the most authentic story and I live the most authentic story. I live my
Hmm.
life, not the life that I want other people to accept me for.
Yeah. And I've noticed very interesting trend in the like influencer culture. Like there's a drive to like share your story. Like
Hmm.
maybe if you're creating your personal brand, you want to at least craft a story which relates with your target audience. And what I've noticed so far, you're constantly like strengthening that story through your content, like you're broadcasting it to everyone, and slowly but surely that story becomes your part of your brand identity.
Right.
So in initial phase, you are driving that identity, like you are telling your stories, but there comes a phase where that story is driving you, like it has become your
Right.
identity, and now it's very difficult to deviate from that story because we humans change all the time. Like
Hmm.
if I found some interesting book, if I found some interesting, like I went on a vacation and there I had some different experience, so it can completely change my story from that point. But since you have put so much work in crafting your perfect story and now it's out there, it gets really difficult to now change suddenly and become a different person. So have you noticed the similar trend, and is there any way to be mindful about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this goes back to the whole acceptance thing. And it's
Hmm.
I have this own issue with my own story and stories that have helped people craft. And it's people typically look for stories that really make them look good or make them look desirable for other people.
Hmm.
They try to find stories like, okay, what can I say in a story that's going to drive people to want to buy from me or drive people to want to follow me? And I think that's kind of where the stories kind of get a little bit inhuman, because they don't really go down to like what's inside. What's that really deep internal voice saying, what you're even doing here, why you're
Mm.
why you're even in business.
Yeah.
The toughest part is really sitting down and asking yourself, why is it I'm doing what I'm doing? Like you sitting down with this podcast right now, it's like, what is the core motivation? When did you first get inspired to sit down and do a podcast? And who are you trying to help? And why is that so important to you? And so it's finding, within your own life, what is that moment that can define everything
Mhm.
that you're doing, that can really connect with people.
Yeah.
So I would say that, if anybody's looking to write a story, think so much more about how do you feel, who are you, and don't worry about what other people are going to think, once you tell your story. The most important thing is that you know that it's real.
Hmm. Very interesting. So taking you back to the that came in around campfire, as you
Hmm.
said, the a lot hasn't changed in the way we tell story. So what makes a story like worth listening? Or what keeps a listener intrigued in that story? Is there some qualities which are present in every engaging story?
Yeah. So there's the biggest problem when it comes to story, and you've probably heard the term before, but it's show don't tell.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, when people tell stories, they are typically talking about what is going on in the story and not showing it. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I'm having a conversation with my girlfriend, and let's say we start having an argument, and I tell you that I'm starting to get, I'm starting to feel upset, or I'm starting to get frustrated. I can look into her eyes and I can tell that, she's not feeling really good about the situation, and we're going back and forth, and then finally we decide that, we're going to go ahead and have, hamburgers for dinner. Let's say that was the argument, right?
Hmm.
Now, you can probably somewhat picture that, and you can somewhat picture, two people having a conversation. But then I sort of just ruin the story for you, because you don't get to decide how I feel or how my significant other feels. I'm the one that's telling you, and I'm basically dictating what I want you to feel in your mind. That I feel is the biggest problem in storytelling, because it is so hard not to do that. It's like we assume that when someone is listening to our story, that we need to make sure that they know how we felt, and how we were experiencing it, in order for them to understand or to feel the same way, when it's completely the opposite. If I just went into a story and I said, I walked into my kitchen and I looked at my girlfriend and I said, "Hey, I think we should have hamburgers for dinner." And she looked at me and she said, "We've had burgers, every night for the last 3 nights. Why don't we do tacos?" And then I looked
Hmm.
at her and I said, "Well, why do we need to do tacos when I want a, hamburger?" Now, I can just go over the dialogue and you can decide for yourself. Like, oh
Yeah.
wow, Brian, he's a pretty stubborn dude. And his girlfriend, is trying to work with her, but she's getting frustrated. Once you start
Hmm.
connecting those dots, and I'm not telling you, now all of a sudden it's a much more intriguing story.
Yeah.
But it goes so much more into that end, Kit, when it comes to, let's say that situation. If I just dropped you in an argument between my girlfriend and I, it's like, well, why care? Like what is really going on? Why is it so important for Brian to have hamburgers?
Hmm.
And so before I even go into that argument, I need to tell you, like, okay, this is what I want. Like, I want to have hamburgers, and this is why it's important to me. And if you understand that why, now you're on my side, and you're like, okay, we're gonna get those hamburgers, and then you see the conflict, you see what gets in my way, and that's my girlfriend who wants to have tacos. Kind of a vague way of explaining how you can really make an engaging story. But to
Hmm.
go back to your original question, when the people are sitting around the campfire, they weren't just sitting around saying, like, yeah, bear showed up and I felt so scared and I started running and then I grabbed a stick and I threw the stick and then, the bear made a loud noise. It's like, no, like they are going to bring you into that moment. It's that you're going to visually see them with that bear, and you're going to be able to experience it with them. So when that moment comes, that's their life or death decision, and they decide to make themselves really big and start yelling really loud, and then they knew that that was going to scare their bear off. Now you as a human know when you encounter a bear, you need to just stand and you need to
Mm-hmm.
just, yell as loud as you can. I might be going on a tangent here at this point, but I
Interesting
mean
tangent.
that's
Actually, yeah.
it's a very tough. I found a very tough subject to be able to communicate clearly. What makes a good story and what doesn't.
Yeah, and I've noticed this. Have you followed this recent Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case? Are you
Oh
interested
yeah,
in?
oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I saw quite a bit of it.
and one thing I noticed, like I didn't follow it like every day they were doing live streams, but whatever I found through news that Johnny Depp was being authentic in his storytelling, like telling his version
Hmm.
of story, and the other side was not very authentic, and somehow you might be biased based on what your ideologies and what your beliefs are, but
Sure.
I think most of the people realize that other people is trying too hard to be authentic. They can clearly say that she's trying to involve too many emotions, and we humans have very subtle, but we can pick out when someone is being fake through their
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. Whether or not we want people to see it or not, even though we want people to accept us and we try to paint,
Hmm.
whatever, I guess you could say, story or image that we want people to see. I mean, what we
Yeah.
don't necessarily want to accept is that we all have BS radars and we know
Hmm.
when someone's not being authentic. Bringing up the Amber Heard case, I actually started watching it specifically because I wanted to see what story are they trying
Yeah.
to tell, and you had the Johnny Depp and you had the Amber Heard, they were both painting, the different stories, and it was very clear that Amber Heard was trying to paint the victim story. And like that was, I'm
Hmm.
sure, her attorney's plan. It's like, we need to go in there and we need to do everything we can to paint you as a victim. The
Hmm.
problem is that since it was an authentic story, as soon as somebody started questioning her and started getting her past whatever she had in her mind as far as what her story was, as soon as they started going beneath the story to really get to what was really happening, then her
Hmm.
whole image started to fall apart because it wasn't authentic. Dots
Yeah.
no longer connected. She painted the story of, him being completely belligerent, destroying all the stuff and filling up that cup of wine. But then once you started really questioning it, it came out that she had actually, I believe, edited that video, to make herself look better. And it's like,
Hmm.
you're not going to save yourself from what's happening to you right now by trying to paint a story. As much as we'd like to think that that's how life works, that we can just do that, it's not possible. And all it takes
Yeah.
is a couple of questions to see whether or not someone's being authentic or not.
There's an interesting argument for me that let's say Johnny Depp is better actor than Amber Heard, and he
Is better
managed
at
to
what?
convince us. Better actor,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
like he managed to convince us his story is real because it's his job, and that's the thing that I have with movies. Like certain movies have, like we know that the story is fake, but I'm not even sure like what's the structure underlying formula behind story writing, uh, behind the acting, which makes us believe in the 90 minutes that we are part of the story.
Hmm.
That's something interesting. So going on that tangent, I would like to ask you like, how do you see cinema as a way of storytelling? Is it the best medium, or are there better mediums than cinema?
Well, cinema is the most entertaining form. It's pretty clear that Hollywood and all these other different, uh, I guess you could say, studios have figured out
Hmm.
what recipe works, and it's the same recipe for basically every single movie you see. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, now that I understand it pretty deeply, I can't really watch a movie the same. I
Hmm.
know how it's going to start. I already know how it's going to end based off the way that it starts.
Yeah.
And so I would say that it's the most entertaining form. And it's something that we can all learn from. If we want to be better storytellers, we can just look at any cinema movie and just ask, okay, what made that story really engaging? And if you can be
Hmm.
subjective and ask, like, okay, what really got me into that story. And here's a couple of things that I can tell you that I have found when I have gone on that journey to try to be a better storyteller for myself.
Mhm.
When I sit down and watch a movie, I ask myself, when do I care? I hit that
Yeah.
play button, the movie starts. I don't know any of the actors. I don't know any of the scene that's going on. At what point do I care? And this is true for any movie that I have seen. And I would love if you did this yourself, so you can let me know whether or not I'm a little bit loopy. But
Mhm.
it's as soon as you know what the main character wants,
Yeah.
as soon as you know what is getting in their way, and as soon as you have that question, are they going to get what they want? That's when you, as somebody who is watching the movie, all of a sudden become engaged. It is now your story along with their story, and you are
Mhm.
then going on their journey with them throughout the entire movie to see whether or not they get what they want. And then what the movie does is they just keep putting obstacles in front of whoever the hero is. They keep putting obstacles that make it even more challenging. Like, okay, how are they going to get past this particular challenge to get what they want?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
anyway.
It's very interesting. And suddenly I've noticed this formula, and it's very common in superhero movies, like even from the DC, even from the Marvel. I also
Mm-hmm.
started watching like Doctor Strange. It came on Disney, and I was watching, and I was clearly noticing the pattern. Like I knew what was gonna happen, so there was no suspense and surprise for me. So I realized that most of the movies are now have become what we can say, like it's filled with visual effect, so
Mm-hmm.
it's entertaining in certain way, like it's a roller coaster ride of visuals and
Right.
sound effect and stuff like that. But the basic formula is still the same. Like a hero has a problem, meets someone who's helped them in between, then they do something and they get in the result. It's a happy, sometimes mostly happy ending. That's what I've
Yeah.
noticed. But there are certain stories. uh, I've I think I watched the movie which it got stuck in my psyche was the Shutter Island, and
I haven't seen it.
it's a very interesting story. You should see.
Shutter Island. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's have a dialogue about it. How did that movie
So,
start?
uh, not to give any spoilers, but there's a huge betrayal in the movie. Like
Okay.
up to the end, uh, and it's a huge
Oh.
risk. Like on the part of story writer, there's a huge
Mhm.
risk. Like if you get so involved in the story and suddenly in the end you betray your audience, then it can go either way. But I like the whole way of storytelling because it's very emotional, and
Mhm.
it goes into very dark places. Like it can go, and someone might be triggered, but it deals the issue with like suicides and homicides, stuff like that. There are some elements of World War II and psychology. So
Mhm.
it was very interesting, and I felt that it's the movies like that. And one more movie was Taxi Driver, which I watched. It was very interesting for me. and
Mhm.
and the recent one was like there are so many interesting movie. The Seven, like SE7EN.
I
What's
haven't seen any of these movies, man. I
very
need to watch
interesting
more
movies.
movies. you
Yeah.
know,
I'm.
on, on top of the fact that I'm a storyteller, I can honestly tell you that like I don't watch movies as much
Mhm.
as I probably should. I watch them
Yeah.
now to study them. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't I don't really watch that
I
many
think
movies anymore.
you should watch like movies that like these twice. Just first, just to enjoy the movie, and second time to figure out what's working here. Because the
Yeah.
movie, The Seven, is starring Brad Pitt, and there's also a huge betrayal involved. Like
Yeah.
they build up the story to that point, and you are like they won't go there. Like you feel like they won't do this. Like it's too
Mhm.
off the edge, like on the edge. They will not do this, and in the end, they do this, and you're like, oh man. So that's a suspense element
So
there.
you kind of get taken back in how they ended up
Hmm.
ending that story and
Yeah,
the
and
whole art.
it can get
Go
very
ahead.
like only certain people will enjoy it who have that gut for it, because it's very like it's not as strange as reality, but It's
Yeah.
not very lame as watching. I would not. I should not call it lame, but it's not as easily consumable as watching a Marvel movie or any superhero movie or any Disney movie which comes out.
Right. Well, and
So yeah.
when you think about like the Marvel movies, because I've also looked into like, storytelling, and the Marvels, and it's like, what made those movies so engaging for people? Of course,
Hmm.
there's the visuals, it's incredibly entertaining.
Yeah.
The stories were fantastic. But what
Hmm.
Marvel did brilliantly is they had a massive story plan from the first time they launched Iron Man, and I believe it was
Hmm.
2008,
Yeah.
all the way up till Endgame. And it's like when they wrote that story, it was like they're going to start with Tony Stark, and then they're going to drop all these other Marvel characters, and they're going to slowly intertwine the rest of the characters, and then they're going to bring them in for the Avengers, and then they're going to have the big theatrical end with
Hmm.
Endgame, which I believe Marvel has sort of deflated a little bit since then. It hasn't
Yeah.
been the same, sort of buzz and hype. It was like 2008 led up to this just beautiful movie in Endgame.
Yeah.
And I pay so much respect for the studio who put all that together, because they made it so entertaining for us as the viewers, because they were connecting dots, but they weren't telling us, like, okay, we're going to connect
Hmm.
this dot. It's like they were just showing us in the movie. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute. There's
Yeah.
Tony Stark at the end of this movie now trying to recruit somebody. It's like, okay, so what's going on here? And especially when I think Tony Stark had said, like, we're putting a team together. It's like, ooh, like, we know, he didn't say like, hey, we're going to, put the Avengers movie, or we're going to get the Avengers together. It's just like, we're putting a
Hmm.
team together. It's like, yeah, let's do it. So anyway, I would say that in storytelling, Marvel, brilliant on how they told their
Yeah.
story.
They played a very long time game because like there are some weak links in the story, like certain movies didn't perform very good, and
Hmm.
they had the same formula working, like hero meets a problem, meets a guy, do something, and in the end there's a happy ending. One stark difference was in the end game, because that movie, no, end game, before the movie before end game was Infinity
Infinity
War.
War. Yeah.
Yeah. I think most of the critics also claim that this was the best movie in that Avengers series. Like
Ooh,
it was so
Infinity War.
well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I
in the
think
end
that
they lose, and
they
if you
do.
watch, yeah.
You don't see that in a lot of movies, in a Marvel movie. And they didn't just lose. I mean, they lost dramatically. I mean, you had
Hmm.
Spider-Man that was like crying on Tony Stark's arm, like, I don't want to, like, I don't want to disappear, or whatever he had said. And it's like, like, talk about being a tearjerker, it's like they really just led it up to this fantastic loss. And then
Yeah.
when what's his name is sitting there, Doctor Strange, and he's like, "We're in the end game now." It's like, "Ooh,
Hmm.
okay, all right." And then he vanishes, So like, again, it's like, what can we learn from the way that Marvel did that? And then if you go over to the DC universe, let's spend just a quick moment on that. I don't know the DC universe that well. I know you've got Superman, you got, of course, Batman, but those were pretty
Hmm.
much that whole thing was a flop, in my opinion. Nobody really stood behind DC like they did Marvel. And DC tried, and they have the studio, and they have the ability to tell great stories. But one question I always ask myself as I was on this journey is like, how did Marvel get it so right, and how is DC getting it so wrong? Why are their movies not, and I hope I'm not offending
Hmm.
you if you're a big DC fan, but how is it that they're not getting the same sort of buzz that Marvel got? I don't have the answer to that, but I feel like there's something that can be learned there between just those two superpowers in the cinema industry. One got it
Hmm.
right, one got it wrong, and what was it that they did, and then you can kind of pull those details out, and then learn how to tell your own story in a more effective way.
Yeah. As you were telling that Marvel played a long time game, and I think that's what was missing with the DC. Like if you watch individual movies like the Batman trilogy with uh, like the Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger
Hmm.
Joker. So that trilogy was in the like three pieces movie, but it didn't engage us enough to watch more stories, like they didn't connect enough. They didn't introduce any special character there, like there was no cameo of Superman.
Hmm.
So we were not hoping for something good. And also one more thing, like they are missing consistency. Like Iron Man from the start is consistently like Robert Downey Jr. is the same actor, and you relate with the personality. Like you recognize him, you've watched him in so many movies, but in that this span, how many Batmans have changed? The new one
Yeah, I
is
think there's a new Batman every decade. I'm pretty sure,
yeah.
and it's been that way since the '50s. So I think you're right. It's tough for us to be that engaged when we're constantly looking at a new Batman movie with a brand new Batman, and it's almost like a
Hmm.
slightly different story. It's like they kind of did the same thing with Spider-Man. They had
Yeah,
the Tobey Maguire, who to me is always going to be Spider-Man. I mean, that's that
yeah.
is that dude is Spider-Man. But then you've got Andrew Garfield and can't think of the dude's name who's the Spider-Man now, but it's like they even went through a series of different Spider-Men,
Hmm.
and once they had the Spider-Man that was introduced into that universe, it's like that's who they stuck with. And with DC, it's like they had can't think of the dude's name who was the Batman in like the Batman versus Superman, um,
Hmm.
Ben Affleck. So they had
Yeah.
him as the main actor, but then they just launched the Batman movie where it was Robert Pattinson, the dude from Twilight. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, like he did a pretty decent job. It was a decent movie, but again, they keep swapping faces, and it makes it hard
Yeah,
for people to really stay engaged in that universe. So I think you're onto something there. I think you might be right.
yeah. And one more thing I've noticed that their individual stories are so much better. Like they are not doing justice to the main story in the movie adaptation, but
Hmm.
they're I think the DC is for adults. If you look at the story of Joker, I don't think any character in Marvel who has the same level. It might be Punisher, like who's a Marvel fan knows that like Punisher stories kind of
Hmm.
R rated, but Marvel is
Right.
mostly for teenagers. And the thing I've noticed with DC is like some of their stories have tendencies to go on the very dark side, like this whole story of Joker, how he became Joker. Like with the comics, it was like you have seen the recent Joker with which was very popular. I'm
Oh,
forgetting the name.
yeah, with Walking Phoenix.
Yeah,
Yeah, that movie
very
was
controversial.
I was so conflicted with that movie because on one side of it, it was a good movie, but at the same time, it was all, like I felt gross,
Hmm.
throughout the end of that movie, it was like, wow, this got super dark. And
Yeah.
you're right. It's like this feels like a murder mystery. This doesn't feel like a comic sort of movie. This feels
Hmm.
like we're dealing with insanity, which we are. And it's not they're just saying, okay, he's gone insane. It's like he did some stuff. I'm not going to ruin the end of the movie, but he did some stuff towards the end. It was like,
Yeah.
wow, this dude's lost it, and it's like that's how they wanted to introduce like this is how crazy he is.
Hmm.
um Even with Heath Ledger, I remember there was a scene where he was talking with Batman when Christian Bale was the Batman, and they're up and he's ruining the party, and I believe he's got a knife to someone's mouth. I don't recall who it
Hmm.
was. He's got a knife to their mouth, and he's like, "Do you know how I got these scars?" And then he's
Yeah.
talking about how his dad used to tell him to smile more. Let's see a smile on that face, and then that's where he cut him. It's like, okay, pretty dark,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was
Very
it's
interesting way
yeah, it's
to
very
tell a
interesting,
story.
but also Joker kept changing the story. I don't know if you recall that, but
Hmm.
Joker kept changing the story throughout the movie. It was like the whole thing on his face. It was like I think there was three different versions of what had happened,
Hmm.
and so it can make the story very inconsistent. It's like okay, well, what's the true story? But it goes along with his insanity. Dude's
Yeah.
crazy.
The main point was to prove that he's a psychopath. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, exactly. They did the job. Yeah, he's just freaking complete
yeah.
psychopath.
So the DC has tendencies to go on these kind of topic. Like they will touch the topic and sometimes go full on with this. Like we want
Hmm.
to tell the original story of Joker, how he originated.
Right.
And Marvel has tendency to pull back on some stuff. Like if you watch the DC movies, and there are some animated movies are which are much more darker than the Joker. Like they
Hmm.
go to death places.
Right.
And on the Marvel, it's very pulled back, and I can understand it's a very business decision. Like you don't want every movie to be R rated. They will not make a good revenue, and only certain section of people will enjoy it. And nowadays, there's a huge chance of getting cancelled. So you have to make a business decisions. But storytelling
Yeah.
wise, DC is out there.
Right. I'm I kind of just had a thought as we were talking about the whole Marvel and DC, and I don't know if you remember this, but way back in, like, I believe it was like the early 2000s, there was the big battle against Microsoft and Apple, and Apple was basically going after ad campaigns to say, "Hey, we're cool," and
Mhm.
Microsoft, like, "You're old school and you're boring," and so people started to really develop a connection with the company, Apple and their
Mhm.
products. And because of that connection, they started to just go away from Microsoft and want nothing to do with them just because they loved Apple so much. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because I believe part of what even happened with the DC Marvel thing is people became so such a fan of Marvel that it almost felt like they were going behind Marvel's back to enjoy DC. It was like, I don't want to do that. Like,
Mhm.
I'm 100% Marvel. I've got the tattoos, I got the posters. I'm all about Marvel. Like, I've chosen my tribe,
Mhm.
and that's who they stuck with. So it made it tough for DC to gain some traction. But then I believe that there's a lesson that we can learn when it comes to us as entrepreneurs and just people that want to go out there and tell our stories. It's like, if we go out there and tell our stories and we build in our tribe, it would make it really hard for people to want to go elsewhere if they're just so if they become so closely connected with us and our story. And I believe that
Yeah.
that's how a lot of people have really built, their communities. I mean, look at Chris Doe. We all
Mhm.
know a lot of his different stories, and we're right there with him. If another person was like, "Hey, I have a community and I try to help designers become better entrepreneurs," or I believe he calls them, creatives,
Mhm.
it's like to me it was like, no, no, like, I'm good, like, I already know this guy's story, like, I appreciate your story, but like, I'm already good. And so I think that
Yeah.
that's where positioning storytelling is so important, because you want to position yourself so that people connect with you, and then once they're connected
Mhm.
with you and they connect with your story, then they become your advocate, and that's how we really grow, a widespread audience.
For sure. And connecting that same with Marvel and DC and with Kizdo, what is there that they keep their promise? Like if they
They keep
promise
their
something to you,
promise.
like if they
Hmm.
promise their audience that we will be releasing this movie, they do this and consistently. Like there's consistency involved. Like if I have promised something, I will do it. And the same thing I've noticed with Kizdo. Like if he has promised to do a call or do something, he will show up
Right.
even if he's not feeling good. I think recently he had COVID and he's healthy now, but he showed up. So I think that's
Yeah.
what matter. Like people can see that this person is showing up for us, so we double down on, like we became a true fan of them. Like they are showing for us, so we should support them so that we
And
can be mutually benefited from each other.
yeah, and what you've touched on, and Kid, I think is very important when it comes to when it comes to storytelling, is what you had said is that they keep their promise,
Hmm.
and a big problem in the market right now is that you've got a lot of people that are saying, like, I keep my promises and I always deliver, and I'm there for my community and I'm there for you and I'm here to help. It's like they say all those things, but they don't really stick that well, and it doesn't really make you feel any sort of way for them. The thing about, let's say Chris Doe for a minute, is the stories that he has shared. His stories tell us that he's somebody who keeps his promise and that we can trust. He didn't tell us, trust me, I keep my promises. It's like
Hmm.
he found stories that can illustrate, this is my character. I'm somebody you can trust, and here's why. So when you're looking at your own, let's say, content, or if you're looking at your messaging, and if you're saying that, like, yeah, I'm Ankit and you can trust me, it's like, okay, well, do you have a story that you can illustrate that they walk away feeling like they can trust you without telling you? At what situation did you demonstrate, your characteristic of trust? And
Hmm.
can you really bring that through? And that's really where the power of storytelling comes in. We don't have
Yeah,
to tell people what our best qualities are. We can just use our stories to show them, and then they feel it.
very interesting. Uh, how how present are you on the LinkedIn? Like, are you very frequent on there?
Lately, yes. LinkedIn has not been something that I've actually felt comfortable with, and I didn't really feel like
Hmm.
it was my platform. I focus a lot on the other social media, outlets, but I'm realizing that LinkedIn is vital,
Hmm.
because that's where the professionals are, and that's where I'm going to market and really make a name for myself. So at this point, LinkedIn is actually my main focus.
Yeah. I asked this because I've noticed very interesting trend on LinkedIn. Like, I don't know if you've read this, but now or then, an interesting post, like a text post, pops up into my feed, and someone is sharing their story about how they failed and how how they overcome it and how they are doing better. And I've noticed this so many times. Like yesterday, I was doing some research on LinkedIn, and I think I saw around 5 posts, between 20 posts were about they are telling stories of how they overcome this and how they overcome that. And I've noticed that it is becoming a trend to tell stories. Some of them, the stories are really good, like you emotionally connect with them, and
Hmm.
some of them are, you can clearly see like it's following a template, like
Following a strict framework.
uh and you can clearly notice it, like the wording is not very changed. You can clearly notice that this person used the template, like this is what their past stage, this is what they do, and this is the result they have. And I've noticed this very common with someone who's selling a service. Like they will tell, like I used to be so, you have got, I think you've seen that video, like someone is standing in front of a private jet. I used to be very poor, now
Yeah,
I
right.
invested in this. So
And now here I am.
here I am, and I've joined my like free webinar, and you can learn how to do this, like drop shipping and stuff, and certain MLM kind of stuff. But what makes these two stories drastically different? Like I connected with one story which is emotional, and I DM'd them, like I really related with your story, and it was thank you for sharing, because I learned a special thing about you. And it was, they were being completely vulnerable. And on the
Right.
side, it seems like a sales pitch turned into a story.
Right.
So what's, I think we know that first one is better for making real connection.
But why? Like what
Yeah.
really made that first story better?
Hmm.
And it honestly, I believe it starts with the intention of the story itself. Whenever we sit down to write a story, it's also important to ask, like, okay, what do we want out of this? And when you've got somebody that gets on a camera and they're saying, like, hey, I was somebody who didn't have, 2 pennies to shake, and I
Hmm.
couldn't afford to buy milk. And now I'm flying around on private jets and I figured out what the secret was and I can share that with you. Now it's very clear that one, they don't really care about you. I mean, they care about getting your sale. They care about getting your money. And it comes through in this story. And whether or not people, again want to try to make it seem like it's not, it's we are able to recognize, when our BS meters are going off.
Hmm.
Now, unfortunately, some people see something like that and they're like, "Hey, I want that vision. That's what I want." What did they figure out? And they reel people in, but time and time again, those aren't the people that are really helping humanity. Those are the
Yeah.
people that are really helping themselves. When you look at the first story, it was like they were taking a very real moment, a very an experience that they had and they shared it in the form of a story. But I also believe that at one point you were able to see yourself like in their early version of that story, who they were when they had their problem. And the stories that we can really connect with are the stories that we can see ourselves in. And then when they got to their moment where they were met with their challenge and then they went into how they were able to overcome that challenge, hopefully as you're listening or as you're reading, you're thinking, "Oh, I just learned something new. I am now more equipped to take on life because this person has
Hmm.
shared this story with me."
Yeah.
So the difference really is what is the intention, and it sounds like the first person to do that story just did it fantastically.
Yeah. The thing I've noticed that it's more authentic. Like I can feel
Hmm.
like the other story sounds too good to be true.
Right.
Like you clearly see that it is very polished. Like my struggle, this is what I did. You can do this, and you can be successful. With the first story, they are, and most of the time it's a true, like true story. They are telling just from the experience, and you can clearly see that they are being authentic, and that's how we relate with this story. Like I could be in their place So I can be in their shoe and I can see like this could happen with me, and
Mhm.
I will face the same challenges, and sometime I will fail, sometime I will succeed. So that's make a good story. Like you are not presenting the perfect version of yourself. You are just being vulnerable, being authentic. But I've
And
also
I'm
noticed there's a very interesting balance to be made. Like your every post cannot be a pity party. Like I'm sharing, I was too miserable, I'm too miserable, or I'm having this many challenges.
Mhm.
You'll have to provide certain values, some value. At the same time, there would be a story to humanize you.
Yeah, when you and I think that's also another big thing when it comes to people that tell stories is they think that the most powerful stories are stories that it really affected them emotionally and were
Hmm.
traumatic situations that happened in their lives. I mean, I could have told you the story about me being a kid, in that sixth grade class and nobody voted for me. And I could have just left it at like, and then I lived the rest of my life and now I'm just kind of in a shell. It's like, you don't feel good about that. And it's like, why did you share that with me? Now I've got that negativity or that sad, heaviness weighing on me. I don't want that. So it's
Hmm.
important for us to kind of get through like, okay, well, the point is that this is what I learned from it. And, now you feel good towards the end. And when you look
Yeah.
at every cinema movie you've seen, it's like they do get to that point where you feel really down. The hero's life has completely been, put through the shambles, and you feel
Hmm.
bad for them. But the movie doesn't end there. If the movies ended there, movies wouldn't be that entertaining because we would just walk away feeling like, like I don't feel good right now. Like that hero just
Hmm.
lost his family. Like I don't want to. I don't want to continue watching this or continue on with my day. So it's very important that as soon as you bring someone to a low point in the story, you have to turn it around and bring it to a high point on something that you learned, whether it's about life or whatever the lesson is. And that's really what makes a well rounded story. But it's got to end
Hmm.
positive in a sense.
I'm not sure. Like it doesn't have to end positive. I'm going back to the movie analogy. Have you seen Fight Club?
I have seen Fight Club.
And
I
it
love
doesn't
Fight Club.
it doesn't end well. So,
So it,
but there's a transformation. Like if you see the
yeah.
journey of Tyler Durden, when he started with I'm forgetting the name of who's the character. Like there's
So
Brad
not
Pitt's
Tyler Durden,
character.
but the other dude. I don't remember his name as well. I know it's
Yeah,
Edward Norton, so I know the actual
and
actor's name, but
I think they don't even tell his name. Do you remember his name?
um, they don't tell his name. That would be
Yeah.
really odd. So let's think about that movie for a minute because I've never actually put any thought into it. But according to my theory, it's got to end positive, right?
Hmm.
So let's think about that movie for a minute. Let's start with the beginning because the beginning is the opposite of the end. And I have found this
Hmm.
with any story you see, it's the opposite of the end. So if you think about when Edward Norton was the movie started, what did he want? Like what did he want in that movie? And to me, I believe what he wanted was to get out of the boring cycle of his day-to-day job and he was
Hmm.
losing his mind because
Yeah.
his life became so routine. And so he went on this journey, by, meeting Tyler Durden and then towards the end of the movie, I mean, things blew up, right? Not to be a spoiler, I'm sure everybody's seen the movie at this point, but
Hmm.
things blew up. But the main character, he left the end of that movie and he kind of got, what he was after. He got a
Yeah.
more exciting life and he didn't have to rely on Tyler Durden anymore.
Hmm.
He killed him off and he's like, you know what? Like I can be good now. So the external world was very negative, but
Yeah.
the main character, which is the journey we went on with as we watched the movie, I believe he ended up in a much more positive state, and he won
Hmm.
by getting rid of his influence that this guy Tyler had on him. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts on that.
For sure. I think the good ending is for the hero. It's not
Hmm.
for the external world or the
It's
one
yeah.
who's watching. If you relate with the hero, then it's good ending for you. But if you see the bigger picture, it's not a good ending at all. It's a whole journey of a deranged person trying to break out of his uh, like regular. routine life, and
Mhm.
in the end he develops some psychological disorders and blows a lot
Yeah.
of stuff. So that's a
And when you look
general
at
story.
I mean, with it being as good of a movie as it is, what you're saying is 100% accurate. It's a psychological movie, where this
Yeah.
dude just sort of lost it mentally, and he ended up, not again, not to spoil, I mean, he ended up having to shoot himself in the mouth in order to break through this psychological issue that he developed within himself. So there is definitely an argument to both sides of it.
Hmm.
You might be right. It doesn't have to necessarily end that positive. Um, I
But
just
that's
don't
a
think it
power.
can.
I think that's a power of story. Like it
Mhm.
can make you relate with the person who you will otherwise, like, if you know their story, then only you can relate with them. So that's a power story. Like we are with them, we are seeing his journey, we are seeing his day-to-day life and the struggles he's having, so we relate with him and we slowly start developing empathy for him.
Right. And we connect with them. So, I want to go back to something you had said earlier as far as like what stories can essentially help connect and like what the intention is. I have a story that I can share with you that of a lesson that I learned, and you can let me know,
Mhm.
like, yeah, okay, like this sort of story I think is essentially helpful. So here's the story. So, about a year ago in a past life, I was a website designer. That was the company that I started. And I started going through and doing these different conversations with people in order to get them to, hire me to build their website. Except time and time again, nobody was calling me back and I wasn't getting any jobs. I'm sitting there watching one of Chris Doe's videos. And before I move on, are you familiar with the whole value based pricing model?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm listening to Chris Doe, and he's like, you should really think about doing the value based pricing. Figure out what their problem is, and then try to, rather than just go after them with a website, try to figure out the problem and then put a value on them solving that problem. So I was
Mhm.
excited, and so I got on my next phone call. I'm talking with a guy about his website, and he tells me his problem, and he tells me really what I need is a booking system. He's like, I'm
Mhm.
getting way too overbooked. I'm getting overwhelmed and I can't seem to keep up with it. It's like, if I can get a website that's got a great booking system, then that is something that would really make my life easier.
Mhm.
And so I asked him, I said, so what price would you put on that? What's the price of that fix? And he was like, $1,000, $1,500. And I was like, okay, perfect. I will do that for you and charge you the 1,500. Problem solved. So the conversation went well. We got off the phone. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get my first job now. I did the value based pricing. I found the problem. He put the price tag on it. I didn't, and here we go. Let's do this. Except I didn't get a call back, and I couldn't
Mhm.
figure out why. It was like, wait a minute, I solved this problem. He put the price on it. Why isn't he calling me back? A month ago, and this was 8 months ago that this happened. A month ago, I'm
Mhm.
watching one of Chris's videos on value based pricing, and he's going over asking somebody, okay, what is the value you put on this? And they put the price tag. He said, okay, I'm going to charge you 20%. Typically in consulting, whenever you find a problem, you don't charge 100%. You charge about 20% because of the risk. And
Mhm.
so I realized that when I did the value based pricing, I got that $1,500. My mistake was trying to charge 100% of what they felt like that problem was. And really, what I should have done is said, okay, well, I'll charge you $300, to help you figure out this problem, and you taking a risk because you don't necessarily know if this
Mhm.
is going to work out or not. So, based off of that story, is that something that you can now think like, okay, if I'm doing value based pricing, I just learned something, or did you already know that?
I I have a very interesting. So to not to dissect the story, but there's, yeah, certainly a transformation. Like you learn something new, and you relate with your past experience. Like this didn't work out for me, and this was the reason. Like you, from this latest video, you figure out like this was the reason that engagement didn't work out. I noticed one important thing going apart from the storytelling part, that you could have still charged $1,500 if the problem was big enough,
Mm-hmm.
if mattered to him a lot. Like he might be overwhelmed with the booking, but it was not a big problem which made him pay $1,500. Like he was not
Right.
struggling. It was not a $1,500 problem, so he will not pay that amount of money. But if you might be through some questions, and it there might be some budget constraint also to keep that in mind. But if he had the budget for it, and the problem was like troubling him enough, he couldn't get to sleep because he was getting overworked. And if you were able to uncover these core issues just through talking, or I'm reading a very interesting book called Coaching Habit, and we just ask targeted questions. Like we just listen to their story, and here's very interesting. Like in storytelling, you will have to be a very good listener also, like to figure out what's the point of their story, and if they are going on some weird tangents, or are they telling their struggles. So you find out that this problem is hurting to their core. Like they can
Hmm.
get enough sleep. They are not able to give enough time to their family. So if you target these objections, like if I provide this booking system, then it's not just gonna help you book more clients like consistently, but it will help you save time. Or if you are doing something more, then you could also ask him, like if you're getting overbooked, would you have you thought about increasing your price? It seems like you are already in the demand, and you are getting so many inquiries. So can you afford to increase your price just to, and how much increase would be enough for you to work less and enjoy time with your family at the same time? So, but it would mean that he would increase his price and you will not get the job,
Hmm.
because that's not the issue you're trying to solve. You have just given advice which is solving a deeper problem which doesn't require your expertise. Just give him coaching solution. So
Yeah.
there's a because while listening to the story, that's what I picked up. It's not related to storytelling, but to the pricing. Like we always, as a Chris says, like if we are a hammer, we see everything as a nail.
Hmm.
So that's what I've noticed working with clients, that they have a bigger core issue at the behind the problem. And if you get there, sometimes the solution would not require your expertise, your solution. Like you they might need does not need to upgrade their website. There could be some completely different thing which you help them uncover. So they might consider you as an expert, and in future, like in the long term, they might gain a lot of benefit from your solution, like which you provided just through consulting. And then they will come back when they have bigger problem with more budget. Let's say he increased his price. With your case, he increased his price and he's getting a lot of good clients through that price, like he's added a filter. But now he wants, since he's getting good clients, he wants to look more professional, like since he's getting high paying client. And
Hmm.
through feedback he learned that he's not looking like a high person who can charge that amount. So he might be looking to for a better identity. So he might come to you like, I don't need a website, I need a complete package. I need to do my brand identity, I need to do, because make me look more professional. So that's a deeper innate desire. It's not just about solving booking problem. That's what I noticed. I go on tangent, but that's what I noticed in that
No,
story.
that was you kind of just had me even revisit that own story in my mind and thinking that that's where I messed up. I messed up because I didn't charge 20%. And that's the story that I wrote for myself and I've kind of just moved on from it. But what you've done is you've kind of just opened that story back up to what else could have been the problem,
Mhm.
at least on my end. And I believe the problem was that I just left it at the booking system when I could have said, okay, if we get this booking system, what does that mean for you? And what do you really want, out of,
Mhm.
your life? And what you had talked about, like if he does have the desire to spend more time with his family because he's getting too overbooked, it's like if I asked him, okay, well, what is that problem worth to you? If we were to solve that problem, if you got an extra 15 hours a week with your children and your wife,
Mhm.
how much is that problem worth to you? And if he had said like, oh, that I would pay $10,000 to get more time with my wife,
Yeah.
all of the sudden $1,500 is like, okay, yeah, that's in the ballpark. Like if you're going to help me get a booking system and you're going to help me get more time with my family, now that's a problem that I'm willing to invest in.
Hmm.
So there is the other side of it that I left it at, okay, you've got the problem, you just want a booking system, and then I stopped. Like, I've got the problem now, I can motivate you to pay me. Let's just go ahead and, let's pull the trigger. When really it's like beyond the problems that are on the surface. It's like there's much deeper problems that we as
Yeah.
people we live with. And really it's like what lives we want to wake up to and be in every day. And those are the problems that if you can solve those, then you can really charge high ticket prices.
Hmm. And it gets really uncomfortable because asking these kind of questions is very uncomfortable. You are there and you think, am I not offending them? Us talking about their family and stuff like that, because we are
Hmm.
just there to solve a technical problem, and who are we to question like how much time they want to spend with their family? This could be a very
Right.
personal issue, so you'll have to take the risk.
Yeah, it's if you kind of just go at it, just sort of just like throwing questions out there. Yeah, you certainly can come across as being, incredibly
Yeah.
offensive. It's like what I do with my family on the weekends is really none of your business. I just want a booking system. But if it's like if you're coming across genuine, and let's take
Hmm.
a step back here when it comes to the whole intention of, the stories that we sell.
Yeah.
If you're the guy that's on the jet and you're saying, "Hey, I can give you this great life. You just need to pay me $1,500. You can spend more time with your family." Well, that's going to come across as, yeah, like I don't want to work with you. Like you're just trying to sell me on the vision of this life.
Hmm.
But if your intention is genuinely caring about who this person is and genuinely caring about helping them get to the life that they want to live in, and they can
Yeah.
feel that, that's when they'll start to open up. And even your questions aren't coming across as very, intrusive, I guess you can say is the
Hmm.
word. Caring about people is vital. If you're caring
Yeah.
about their money, then your questions are going to come across that you care about their money and you're
Hmm.
trying to get your hands on it. But if you're just coming across like I just want to help you as a human, get to the life that you want, I probably can't, but it'll help you even understand what you want. Then I believe that that's when they'll come to you, and like you had said, they'll come to you and say, "Hey, like I need to go to you. You understand me and you're going to help me get here."
Yeah. And
Very
since
good
this
point.
is uncomfortable, very few people are doing this because there's a huge risk. Like you got, because you tried hard. Let's say you connected them with on LinkedIn, you dropped a few messages here and there, you had conversation, and
Right.
out of 100 people you managed to book two or three leads like this. So you are
Right.
already in the mindset like, I have to book this as whatever it takes. I will be ready to
Mhm.
accept lower prices. So you are going it with a like, I need this job as like, or I will not be able to survive. So that gets in way of your solving a problem, because whatever the first problem will they pose, you will devise your solution according to that. Like, yeah, this is the surface level problem. Yeah, you need to upgrade your website. Yeah, we will do that. But
Yeah.
the same thing is also with the stories. Let's say you are working with a brand and you need to pick out their story. So let's say you have some questions just to figure out like, why did you found the company. But if you don't go into depth, like ask stories behind, apart from, because there could be a surface level story which they tell to the world, and there's a story which deep down they have. Let's say I'm working with a tech company and their prime motive is to earn money, like sell the company as soon as they can, require funding, and like divide the shares and like sell their shares and move on. That could be a
Mhm.
motive. So you have to be very picky, like what kind of people are you working with, because on the surface level it might look like they have a good story, but if you start working with them, then they realize how fake they are. And to craft their brand story, it will always be on the surface level. And the thing
Right.
I've noticed with the brand which are genuine and have a tribe of people, like they are telling their authentic stories. And as a job of a like a person who does branding or who's working on the story, our job is to figure out if they are good fit for us. Like are will be able to tell their story as authentically as they have. So we'll have to figure out that. So, yeah, I was going on some interesting tangent there, but I lost the train of thought.
It's all good. You touched on something that I think is incredibly important, and that's the story that we choose to tell when it comes to, let's say, our founder story. As a matter of fact, yesterday I heard a very interesting story that was just a really great founder story. I heard a couple of them actually, but
Hmm.
the one that stuck with me was the story about a guy who started a bakery. Um, and he always had the dream of just, having really, great baked goods, for his community, and that's just what drove him.
Hmm.
Now, he planned a trip with one of his friends, and it was a 150-mile biking trip. And he takes his energy bars and he goes through, he goes through the journey, and then he takes, I believe it's 5 or 6 of them, and halfway through, he has gone through 5 of them because he's burning up so much energy. Except in this time, energy bars were just so hard to just hold in your stomach. I mean, they just sat in there and they were really uncomfortable. They just felt like bricks in your stomach. They didn't taste very
Hmm.
good. And so he's on the top of this mountain and he's talking to his friend and he's like, there's just no way. Like I don't even want to eat my last one because it's just, even though I need the energy, like I can't do it. So he finishes the trip with his friend and he goes back to his bakery and he's like, you know what? Like, I can do this better. Like, I have a
Hmm.
bakery. I can take what I know as far as baking and try to make an energy bar that tastes really good, that is incredibly nutritious, that gets everybody to not want to shy away from, having them. And then he decided that he wanted to name the energy bar. As soon as he got to work, he wanted to name the energy bar after his father, and his father's name was Clifford. And I
Hmm.
don't know if you've heard of the Cliff Bar, but that's the origin story, the founder story of how the Cliff Bar was born. The
Yeah.
story wasn't about how a guy wanted to just simply have a better tasting energy bar because all the other ones were crap, and he found the right recipe and then he started, selling them. And like that's not going to really stick with people, but knowing like this was the I'll bring you into the moment that I realized that this is what I wanted to do. That's what makes a really great connecting founder story. What was that pivotal moment that
Yeah,
you just knew, like, I've got to do this, like something has to change?
for sure. And even with the brands we love, their story are very similar. Let's say the brands which Elon Musk has developed. Like he's true to his story. He wants to go on the
Hmm.
Mars, and this story might be too out there. Like people will be like, this sounds too good to be true. Like, but he believes in story, and it shows in every medium he talks. He might be a very good communicator, but he believes in his story, and that's why he's been able to convince so many people to join in his cause. So authentic stuff feels like authentic.
Yeah, I mean, if you I don't know the exact like details of his story, but I do know that at one point he was sitting there and he's like, NASA, like, they don't have it right when it comes to building rockets. I
Hmm.
can build a better rocket at a more affordable price and I can help humanity get to another planet. Now
Yeah.
that to me is crazy, and it's to most people is crazy. Like, you're gonna go
Hmm.
against NASA, you're gonna try to get humanity to Mars. But look at the dude. Look at what he accomplished, and
Yeah.
he couldn't have done that if he didn't have this really great story where he's got this massive team that's around him. I mean, you've got well-educated people. He's probably recruited people from NASA and said, "You want to stick with me because I'm going to make a difference in humanity."
Hmm.
Don't go against NASA, who's just trying to do whatever it is that they're doing. Come with me because we are going to change humanity. And he's succeeding in that. And the people that have helped him, they all get to spend their lives knowing that they're using their minds and their abilities and their expertise to really make, a big difference, and they that gets to be their story. So anyway, you brought up a really good, example of, why a founder story is so important.
Hmm.
There's no way Elon could have built the empire he did with the people that he did had he not had a story that connected and just that got him to recruit, the talent that he did.
Yeah. That's a key way to build your tribe. Like have a big audacious goal, and the fan you will have, like in the beginning it will be very hard. Like this, in the beginning he worked with his brother for small companies, and it's a very old company like SpaceX. They had so many failures. Like he had a very interesting video of rockets blowing up. like how many failures he had, and when he had success, everyone came to support him. So if
Right.
your story is powerful enough, you will have that drive to face as many failures as you can because you believe in the
Yeah.
story.
Right.
So
And when it comes to us telling our own stories and being entrepreneurs, the most difficult thing and what I'm trying to work on helping entrepreneurs do when it comes to storytelling is finding the right stories,
mhm,
finding those moments that, you tell people about and then they just look at you as like, "Oh, and kid, like I've got to support you because I believe in what your cause is. I believe what you believe and I can see your vision and I want to be there to be a part of it."
mhm,
Finding those stories is incredibly difficult, but it's vital to just spend time thinking about your life
yeah,
and thinking about what's influenced you and thinking about really what you want to do during your time on earth. And once you can communicate that and package it in a story, that's when you can kind of go out into the world and really start to connect with people that want to be a part of what it is that you're doing.
yeah. And it's very tricky job to do. It can get
It's very tricky.
very emotional. Like the recent client I'm working with, he has a very unique story and uh, very unique experiences. So when I was working with to craft his story, at some points he got very emotional. So you'll have to be ready for it. Like they will get really emotional, and that's when you know like you have hit the mark. Like
Right.
they will be teary-eyed and they will get emotional. Their voice will start shaking. So you notice that you have touched into something deep, and now you know that you have got the story. So that was
Yeah.
the experience I had.
That's so interesting. I haven't really thought about once you see it within them and you start seeing them get emotional, it's like, okay, I've touched on the right story.
Hmm.
I did hear a tip yesterday that kind of complements that. And when it comes to the founder story, you have the right founder story if whoever you tell it to becomes motivated to want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They become motivated to want to make a difference. And it's like once you have found that story, like the Cliff Bar story, I
Hmm.
started thinking about that like, yeah, like I want to be somebody who finds a problem like that and makes a difference. Once you found those stories, that's when, you end up making a difference in your messaging.
Yeah. Okay. So on this note, Brian, wow, very interesting conversation.
Yeah, this has been great. Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
you invited me for this conversation. I could talk about stories all day long.
So please let us know like where we can find you and how to reach out to you.
So right now, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I plan on giving as many tips as I can to help, find the stories for sales and
Mhm.
marketing campaigns. So that's my big focus on LinkedIn, or I'm sorry, on Instagram. But then the same thing on LinkedIn. I'm wanting to share stories that are really like other different founder stories, so people can be inspired and kind of get their head wrapped around like, okay, this is a good story. Do I have a story in my life that looks like this? So
Mhm.
LinkedIn, I think on Instagram, I'm at the Brian Drake, and then on LinkedIn, I'm just me. So
Yeah.
you can find me on those two platforms.
Awesome. And please reach out to him. I'm sure he will respond to your DMs and will give you some very interesting tips. So yeah,
Excellent.
awesome conversation and keep writing stories.
Okay, and Kate, you have a good one.
Awesome. I'll